The girl left her friend's house on a bicycle and disappeared without a trace. Within a few hours, dozens of people came out looking for her, and the police got involved in the case. Despite the fact that detectives had a completely clear version of what happened from the first days, this case dragged on for many years until the unexpected ending shocked everyone. Jodie Parrack was born on September 2, 1996 in the small American village of Constantine, Michigan. She was cheerful and active, loved to play sports, and spend time outdoors with her friends. The girl also often went fishing with her older brother. On November 8, 2007, when Jodie was 11, she finished school and came home. Soon after, the girl decided to go visit her friend, who lived just a few minutes from her house. Jodie took her bike and waited for her brother to accompany her. Their mother always insisted on this. The woman was afraid to let the girl go alone, despite the fact that their village was a relatively calm place. The brother walked with her and later had to accompany the girl back home. But when he came to her friend's house again, her parents said that Jodie had already left. The boy did not attach much importance to this, because she only had to drive a few hundred meters, but the girl was not at home, and her mother immediately became worried. It was already evening, and Jodie should have been back a long time ago. She never stayed anywhere without permission, so the woman strongly doubted that Jodie could just go on a walk. The girl's parents immediately called her uncle, a reserve police officer named Ray McCann. He came to them and offered his help in the search. As a result, Jodie's mother, along with other relatives and friends of the family, got into their cars and began to comb the village. Her mother also stopped by all her friends' houses, but none of them saw Jodie after school. When it got dark outside, the woman decided to contact the police, and the officers immediately joined the search. The mother periodically ran into other people driving around the village looking for her daughter, and at some point she crossed paths with Ray, a reserve police officer. They discussed the places they had already visited, and then Ray asked if anyone had looked at the local cemetery. The woman found this question very strange. Why did the man think about such a specific place? In addition, Jodie clearly would not have gone there of her own free will, and could only be there if something happened to her. At the same time, Ray, for some reason, was in no hurry to independently verify his guess by examining other places. As a result, the woman and other people decided to go to the cemetery, and already at the entrance to it she noticed something alarming. Jodie's bicycle lay at the entrance, and a few tens of meters from this place, the mother discovered the body of her daughter. There were no visible wounds on her. Only when the girl's body was handed over to a medical examiner, they determined that the cause of death was strangulation. Afterwards, on her wrists, experts came to the conclusion that the girl had been wearing handcuffs or plastic ties for some time. In addition, she was subjected to violence. But experts did not find traces of semen from which a DNA sample could be isolated. However, they noticed a small speck of blood on Jodie's clothing, and upon closer examination, traces of saliva were also found. After examining both of these samples, experts isolated a DNA sample from an unknown man who was not in the FBI database. Detectives began their investigation and first spoke to Jodie's mother. During these conversations, it seemed to investigators that the woman was hiding some information from them. They did not specify what exactly made them think so, but the mother soon understood. The police admit that she is somehow involved in the death of her own daughter. After this version did not find any confirmation, investigators switched to Jodie's older brother, a boy who was 13 years old at the time and was almost directly accused of murder. The police put forward a version that he and his friends could have done something to the girl, but this version was not confirmed in any way. When information about the interrogations of the victim's mother and brother hit the media, the police said that they were just based on statistics. Most often, relatives and close people are behind the murder, so they had to work this line out. Eventually, they stopped considering their involvement and moved on to another suspect. During the investigation, they learned that Ray McKinn asked as many as 4 times during the evening if someone was looking for the girl at the local cemetery, but he himself never got there. Considering that her body was found in this exact location, this behavior turned out to be suspicious. Investigators questioned him, but the man denied any involvement in the murder. According to Ray, on November 8, he spent the first half of the day at home playing the console. When his 2 sons returned from school, he went with them to a local store, where he bought them the toy guns the children had been asking him for. After that, they went home. Around 5 p.m., Ray's wife returned from work. The family had dinner, and around 8 p.m. the man was informed that Jodie was missing. He went searching alone in his car. Having traveled half of the village, he met other people who were also looking for the girl, and asked if anyone had examined the local cemetery. During interrogation, Ray was asked why he pointed to this particular place. The man stated that he was guided by his experience as a police officer and banal logic. Dozens of people searched for the girl for several hours in a small village, and no one thought to inspect the cemetery. When asked why he didn't go there himself, Ray replied that he looked at other places, and eventually he got there. By that time, there were already a lot of people there, and the girl's mother found her body. The police had no evidence that could link Ray to the murder, so they continued the investigation. In the months that followed, investigators conducted several hundred interviews and took DNA samples from 300 villagers, including Ray. But all this did not bring any results. Since then, the case has dragged on for years, as detectives were unable to find new evidence. But the police continued to believe that Ray was behind the murder, and they ultimately focused on proving his guilt. Over the years after Jodie's death, he was interrogated more than 20 times. The man never used the services of a lawyer, and voluntarily took a polygraph test twice. Despite this, the sheriff's office became increasingly convinced that the killer was sitting right in front of them. In the summer of 2011, detectives decided to change tactics and increase pressure on Ray, hoping to get a confession. He was again called in for questioning and told that they had irrefutable evidence that indicated that it was he who left the girl's body in that cemetery. Investigators also said that the prosecutor's office has already reviewed the case, and they are ready to take it to trial. In conversations with him, the police admitted that he could have accidentally stumbled upon the girl's body or killed her unintentionally. They tried to get at least some kind of confession from him, but Ray continued to insist on his innocence. During subsequent interviews, detectives said the victim's DNA was found on his clothing and inside his car. Ray continued to insist that he didn't touch Jodie and suggested that the DNA might have gotten there after he pulled her mom away from her body that evening. However, investigators said that the woman denied these words. In addition, the police said they had CCTV footage from the village which disproved his alibi. Ray said that that day he was sitting at home and playing a video game console, but the police said that they noticed him on the street in one of the recordings. Ray continued to insist that he was telling them the truth. Then the detectives used another trump card. After examining his computer, they discovered that on the day of the murder, the man was visiting websites with erotic content. In their opinion, this once again indicated his involvement in the murder. They also insisted that Ray had 2 sets of handcuffs. The man turned them in during the early stages of the investigation, but experts did not find any traces of DNA from Jodie. Ray insisted he never had a second set, but the police didn't believe him. However, their interrogations led nowhere, and they were forced to release the man. By that time, all the villagers already knew about the suspicions against him, and believed that Ray was escaping punishment for murder. Detectives also spoke with his relatives on multiple occasions, including his 2 sons and daughter. 4 years after the murder, they asked them if the boys had gone shopping with their father to buy toy guns, and they couldn't remember. In addition, the police told Ray's wife that there was enough evidence against him that he would be jailed for murder anyway. As a result, the woman divorced him, taking the children. Ray continued to live free, but everyone was 100% sure that it was he who killed Jodie. But there was one important nuance in this whole story. The evidence that the police talked about for years did not actually exist. The only clue they had was the fact that the man was offering to check out the cemetery. But all this did not help them achieve a confession, and in 2014 they decided to arrest Ray. True, they could not charge him with murder, so the man was charged with 5 counts of perjury. In those days, these episodes were built on the fact that during various interrogations that took place over several years, Ray sometimes said contradictory information. For example, some participants in this case could not remember conversations with Ray that day, which the man himself spoke about during interrogations. The man hired a lawyer, who called the charges against Ray completely baseless and ridiculous. He pointed out that the police were picking on inaccuracies in his testimony, which he gave several years after the incident. But the judge sided with the investigators, and Ray was eventually found guilty of perjury and received 20 months to 20 years in prison. All village residents, including Jodie's relatives, were glad that the dangerous criminal was behind bars. Despite the fact that Ray was still not charged with murder, he was able to be isolated from society and give the police more time to finally find the missing evidence. This continued until 2015, until something unexpected happened on July 28th. In a nearby town called White Pigeon, just a 5-minute drive from the village, a 10-year-old girl was riding her bike down the street. At some point, a man came out of his garage and asked the girl to help him move the boxes. She knew the man, so she got off her bike and went to his garage. As soon as the girl was there, the man took out a knife, grabbed her, and tried to tie her up with plastic ties. But she managed to break free and run away, after which she immediately told her parents about what had happened. The police quickly got involved in the case, and the attacker was arrested. He turned out to be 65-year-old Daniel Furlong, who in the past worked as a children's sports coach. After searching his home, detectives found a list with the names of several local girls. Given that he had just tried to kidnap another girl, the police immediately assumed that the sheet contained the names of other potential victims. After studying his biography, investigators found out something else. In the past, he lived in the same village as Jodie, but was never prosecuted. However, a very strange episode was associated with it. On November 18, 2009, 2 years after Jodie's murder, a 12-year-old girl was walking home from school. Walking past one of the houses, she noticed a man coming from around the corner and looking intently at her. The girl got scared and ran home, where she told her mother about what had happened. Moreover, she recognized this man. It was Daniel Furlong. The woman immediately reported this to the police. Like all the other residents, she perfectly remembered Jodie's murder, and at that time people were not yet convinced that Ray was the perpetrator. But the police said that Daniel is a good, respected person, so she shouldn't worry. Investigators spoke with him, and the man stated that he was not following anyone. This is where the story ends. Nevertheless, the woman continued to consider Daniel suspicious and even dangerous. Since then, she did not let her daughter alone, even in the courtyard of their own house. Let's go back to 2015. After Daniel's arrest, a sample of dank was taken from him and loaded into the database. To the detectives' surprise, they immediately got a match to an old case, the murder of Jodie Parrack. It was his saliva and blood that was found on her clothes. It was further revealed that at the time of Jodie's murder, he lived just a few streets away from where she disappeared. The police spoke to him only once and did not even ask him to give a DNA sample, since Daniel did not seem suspicious to them. A few years after the murder, he moved from the village to a neighboring town. There the man lived with his wife, children, and grandchildren, having an excellent reputation among his neighbors. After his arrest, detectives found another possible victim of Daniel. In 1997, a 6-year-old girl went for a bike ride near her home and disappeared without a trace. By a very creepy coincidence, in those years the man lived not far from this place. Several witnesses saw a suspicious man driving around the area in chalk, and based on their testimony, they compiled a portrait of the suspect. The man in the image looked a lot like Daniel, but in that case the police were unable to find any evidence that could link him to this case, and the man was not even considered as a suspect. On September 10, 2015, he was charged with Jodie's murder. At first he denied his involvement, but then investigators offered him a deal. They promised to drop charges for a recent attempted kidnapping of a girl, as well as grant immunity for any other crimes he may have committed in the county. In this case, the man could receive not a life sentence, but a slightly shorter prison sentence. In return, Daniel had to confess to killing Jodie and reveal all the details of what he had done. The man asked for time to talk with his family, and within an hour he accepted this offer. Daniel said that that day he was cleaning out his garage, noticing Jodie riding by on a bicycle. He called her over and asked her to help move the boxes. When the girl entered the garage, he attacked her, tied her up with plastic ties, and subjected her to violence. After that, he killed her and took the body, along with the bicycle, to the cemetery. As a result of this deal, Daniel received from 30 to 60 years in prison. Given his age, he has practically no chance of being released. After the verdict, he made his final statement, saying that he was ashamed of his actions and he sincerely repented. A few weeks after that, the former sheriff came to visit Ray in jail. The man thought the policeman was going to apologize to him for falsely accusing him. However, the sheriff managed to surprise him. He stated that he still considers Ray an accomplice in this case, and accused him of helping Daniel commit this crime. At the same time, Daniel himself said during interrogations that he had never known Ray. The sheriff later gave an interview to a local television station and said that he had absolutely no regrets about Ray. He explained this by saying that he was arrested not for murder, but for perjury. Therefore, his conscience remains clear. Ray remained in prison until December 2015, when it was time to apply for early release. When he was released, the man moved to another city and only occasionally came to the village to visit his father's grave. A year later, a studio that was making documentaries became interested in Ray's case. They issued a request for all the evidence in this case and found out something interesting. During his trial, the sheriff said he had CCTV footage that showed Ray lying about his whereabouts on the evening of the search for Jodie. The sheriff relied on camera footage from a local factory. During interrogations, Ray said that he came to the cemetery along a specific path, but the sheriff said that the camera footage refuted these words. In fact, it turned out that this camera did not capture the path at all and was directed in a different direction. This fact caused a wave of indignation in the media. It is not entirely clear how the court accepted the sheriff's words as truth and did not check the actual recording, but the fact remains a fact. This episode was one of 5 for which Ray was sent to prison, and the sheriff, who turned out to be the one who lied under oath, did not receive any punishment and retired with honor. Due to wide public outcry, the court reviewed the charges against Rhea, and in December 2017 they were completely dropped. 2 years later, the man received a payment of $40,000. Considering that Ray had lost his entire family, served almost 2 years in prison, and survived several attempts on his life there, he was not at all happy with this outcome. He wanted the sheriff and other parties responsible for his broken life to be held accountable. Therefore, at the end of 2019, he filed a lawsuit against them. As a result, he was awarded an additional payment of $88,000. However, the authorities filed an appeal, and this decision was overturned.